How are you guys doing today? Welcome back to the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Sports Network. I'm your host, Manny Maradiege, here today on a Friday, January 10th, getting just a day away from the start of the NFL wildcard round. We've had already a couple playoff games if you guys have been following the college football playoff, which is set to continue tonight. It should be another great game. But in today's episode, we're going to focus on mainly all surrounding the NFL with a couple previews here of the wild card round, mostly on Sunday. Then we're going to get to what we didn't get to yesterday, talking about the most important players on each playoff team. We did the AFC yesterday, and now we're going to get to the NFC teams today, as well as giving our 2 cents on the situation in Atlanta with Kirk Cousins and the Atlanta Falcons. Their general manager saying today that they wouldn't mind having Kirk Cousins there as their backup, and we're just going to discuss whether or not we agree and maybe some alternative options for Kirk Cousins as well. But all of that is coming up on today's show, so make sure to stick around. But before we jump into all these previews, I'd like to remind you guys that you guys do have the opportunity to be a part of our live shows. If you guys have any questions, comments, or just any opinions you'd like to share during these live shows, please don't hesitate to do so. Your input and insight is always a great addition to the show, and we always appreciate your guys' perspective to get us to maybe think of other things that we didn't think of before during these live shows. So if you want to make it absolutely sure that your message stands out and gets featured on any of the live shows, please use the new Super Chat feature. Just click the $ at the bottom of the chat box to send in your Super Chat, and this way it guarantees that your message not only gets on the air, but that we're able to read it and, say it out loud and take the conversation maybe in a different direction. So go ahead, let us know what you're thinking, hit the Super Chat button, and let's keep this show as interactive and as exciting as possible. We always appreciate and always love knowing what you guys are thinking during these live shows, so please get involved with the shows. But now we can start jumping into some of the breakdowns of these games, right? I like to push it off to as close as possible to the weekend, just in case there's any, last-second injury news or anything like that. So we're going to start off with the first game that we have on Sunday between the Denver Broncos and the Buffalo Bills. Last time the Denver Broncos were in the playoffs, they were raising the Lombardi Trophy with Von Miller as their Super Bowl MVP. And now 8 years later, he's hosting his former team in Buffalo in the first round of the playoffs, right? Von Miller's new team, the Buffalo Bills, enter as the number 2 seed after winning the AFC East for the 5th straight time. And also, Josh Allen, also the main focus of the Bills, having an MVP caliber season. Oddly enough, in a season where we look back to like July, June, or something like that, heading into, the real portion of mini camps and things like that. After we found out everything about Stephon Diggs, if we would have gone back there and told everybody that the Buffalo Bills would be the number 2 seed, a lot of people would have a problem believing that. And I think it's a testament to where the Buffalo Bills are as of right now as a team and the kind of season that they've had as well. But similarly, talking about beating the odds, the Denver Broncos also had nobody really believe in them, that they'd even be close to the playoffs with the whole Russell Wilson situation, with, everything about this roster not really giving you too much optimism that they were going to be in the playoffs with a rookie quarterback. Courtland Sutton, there was a point in time in the offseason where maybe they were considering trading him, where there was a lot of talk about him, and you were really considering what kind of year this would be for the Broncos, whether or not they would really embrace, rebuilding or would really give this a shot. And they really did. And we found out a lot about them. We found out a lot about their defense and how good it was. Also about the constant improvement of Bo Nix and, the polishness of his game has really shown out this year. And also, credit to Sean Payton for the job that he's done coaching this team. He returns to the playoffs for the first time since 2020. And compared to the Bills, this is the Bills' 6th time making the playoffs as well. But now they're facing off against each other in the first round of the playoffs. And regarding any injury news, I haven't seen any major news regarding, each of the squads. It looks like both of them are two of the healthiest teams going into the playoffs, other than maybe like the long-term injuries like Alex Singleton to the Denver Broncos, and that was ages ago. Really, most of the players on both sides are going to be playing, so that's always good, right? You don't like to go into a game knowing that one team's already, down, or they're already like back a couple steps because they're missing a wide receiver or an offensive lineman or something like that. So we're really going to see both teams' best shot at trying to go out and win this game. And speaking about winning this game, one thing that I'd like to see from each of these teams in order to get that victory is, starting with the Buffalo Bills, I want to see them, like I kind of alluded to yesterday when we talked about their most important players. I mentioned James Cook. I want to see them run the ball early and often, right? Because I think when we go into the playoffs, everything is about the best players, right? Everything is about the quarterbacks and how they play and how they elevate their teams. But it's just as much as it is the quarterbacks as it is, complementary play, what everybody else is doing to make sure they execute on their job so they can, go out there and get a victory. And I think for the Bills, something that they need to do is run the ball. Obviously a lot, because not only, are the Denver Broncos very good, their secondary is very good, their pass rush is very good, but I just don't want to let their pass rush kind of dictate the pace of this game. I don't want them to speed up Josh Allen. I don't want them to disrupt things early and often. I want the Bills, if I'm part of the Bills, I'd want them to go out there and have them dictate the game, control the pace and everything like that, especially at home, right? You have that advantage. You have everybody on your side. Go out there and control the game through the running game. And I think that if they're able to do that at an efficient pace going forward, I think it not only kind of shakes off any playoff anxiousness that players might have, but also if you're successful with it, you start wearing this defense down early and often, and then by the third quarter, fourth quarter, they might not be getting off the ball that quickly. They might be feeling the effects of having to try and tackle Josh Allen or James Cook or Ray Davis that they, circle in. Also, Ty Johnson. That's the kind of luxury the Bills have with multiple running backs. So they have the personnel. I don't think they need to go out there and throw the ball to kind of prove a point, like they're not scared of the Broncos secondary or anything like that. If that's something that's their strength, I think a counter move would just be looking somewhere else and also sprinkling some throws there, here or there. They're very capable of doing that. But I think, to me, the number one thing to do would be to run the ball and kind of have those pass rushers just think twice about, really committing to a pass play, right? And just rushing the passer. Make them earn it, right? Make them earn the right to rush the passer. So that's what I want to see from the Bills. And then on the other side, for the Broncos, similarly, on the defensive side of the ball for them, to try and keep Josh Allen in the pocket, trying to make him be as accurate and as mistake-free as possible, right? Make him almost like second guess what he's really about to do, right? If you could keep him in the pocket and he's really not having any success kind of extending plays, then he's going to have to sit in there and try to dissect this team that, again, like I mentioned, has a very good secondary and they have a very good pass rush. So if you keep him in the same general area, not only is it going to help your pass rush, but also you're going to force him to be extremely accurate, and the margin of error for him really becomes a lot smaller, right? And that way you're kind of dictating what the offense is trying to do, right? You're getting them to play to your, to your strengths rather than the other way around. If you have Josh extending the play, running all over the place, and really throwing everything off, then guys get open, the pass rush gets tired, the secondary guys get tired, and he usually is successful more often than not doing that. So I think the Broncos really need to focus in on that, and that leads me into the matchups, right? Talking about keeping Josh in the pocket, one of the biggest matchups that will game, you have the Broncos, who lead the NFL with 62 sacks, and the Bills' offensive line that has only allowed 14 sacks, which is the lowest in the NFL since 2009. So winning those battles, not over pursuing, on the outside, and then having Josh just step up and run for like another 15 yards, all of that's going to be important. The details in that are going to be fundamental. So If the Broncos can kind of disrupt that, throw Josh off his rhythm, that's going to be huge for them. Then I briefly talked about this before, the Bills' defense, and how often they play zone going up against the Broncos' offense, right? Their weapons that they have on that side of the ball. How can, one, the Bills' defense sort of confuse Bo Nix, maybe show him a look early on, change it completely once the ball is snapped, maybe he thinks it's single high, then you bring another guy back there, or it's man and you kind of disguise it as zone. Those sort of things, really disguising what kind of zone you're in, could be beneficial against a rookie quarterback again. And I mean, if the Broncos are able to also decipher on it and, kind of pick it apart, then you force the Bills, again, to kind of play to your hand and try to match it with you rather than you figuring out what they're trying to do, right? So I think if the Broncos and Bo Nix aren't really confused by any zone coverages or are successful kind of reading it, that'll be a huge point in this game as well. And kind of similarly with how I mentioned with the Broncos trying to keep Josh Allen in the pocket, same thing. If the Bills can keep Bo Nix in the pocket with A.J. Epinesa, Von Miller, Ed Oliver, it takes away a pretty significant part of his game. The running aspect of it, how athletic he is, he uses that a lot. So if you can take that away, then his margin of error is very, very small. So those are all the keys to kind of lead us into a direction of picking a winner. And at the end of the day, I just decided to go with the Bills because I think people start to forget how good the Bills are at running the ball. Josh and all the crazy throws that he makes and their passing game with Amari Cooper, Keon Coleman, Dalton Kincaid, and Khalil Shakir is great, but running the ball with 3 running backs that they cycle in routinely, and Josh Allen as well, who's huge, is not an easy task for anybody. And that's going to be like a 12-round boxing match, right? If you're trying to tackle those guys throughout the duration of 60 minutes, it gets hard. So I think they also have that aspect of their game that they could add to it. And I just feel like the Broncos going into hostile environment in a area where they haven't been to, obviously, for a long time with a rookie quarterback, I just feel like they have to play so perfect that I just don't see them not throwing like a turnover or costly penalties or something like that. And it just comes with the inexperience. So I'm going to go with the safe pick and go with the Buffalo Bills. I think they get it done at home and they'll be moving on to the next round. But that's only the first game we're going to talk about, right? We got a couple more on the Sunday slate. Well, I'll also save the Monday game for obviously next Monday when we preview that. So the next game we have coming up here is arguably one of the most entertaining ones between the Packers and the Philadelphia Eagles. They play once again after the Eagles won in Week 1. The Packers try to surprise everybody with another upset in the first round. We'll decide if they're going to be able to do it when we return after this break.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign.
I wanna be the greatest. Everybody on the fake shit. I look around and feel like everybody is the fakest. I make this every day and I'm impatient, hoping one day I blow up from the basement. Statement, the top is so vacant. I don't hear shit that I think is amazing. Waiting for my day when I'm playing sold out shows for 1,000 faces. Hey, give me that crown, get in my way and to be put down. It ain't your place, all this my town. If I want that shit, then I'll get it right now. I'm losing it, the noose it fits, I'm losing shit. A stupid myth, you choose to live or choose to dip. You choose to fight or lose your grip and lose a gift.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind?
All right, guys, we are back here to discuss the second game that we have on the wildcard slate on Sunday between the Eagles and the Green Bay Packers. The Eagles and Packers, we got another rematch in this first round of the playoffs after these two teams faced off in Brazil. The Eagles look to get another win over the Packers, this time on American soil, on Philadelphia territory at Lincoln Financial Field. This time there's concerns from both sides, though, surrounding their quarterbacks. At least at the start of this week, the Eagles are definitely feeling a lot better now around their quarterback situation because Jalen Hurts, started off still in the concussion protocol, and that was something that was being monitored, obviously, because it's not like any regular injury, right? You guys know how you can't just kind of go out there and try it out, right? They won't let you with a head injury, right? You have to clearly be able to clear the protocol before they even let you back to practice. So all of that news really turned positive for the Eagles on today and also yesterday because Jalen Hurts was a full participant at practice, and that pretty much just cleared him to play. So he's going to be out there, and really the only thing the Eagles have to worry about in that regard, I guess, would be some of the rustiness. He hasn't played since the Commanders game in Week 16, so not having any football at all, no practice, no nothing, is going to be, I guess, a bit of a challenge, but the biggest thing is that Jalen Hurts is going to be out there. While on the other side, you look at Jordan Love and his situation with injuries. He injured his elbow last week, and although he was kind of warming up to kind of go back into the game at one point, that never really flourished into anything. And now heading into the wild card round, he's been a limited participant at practice up until Wednesday, and then yesterday and today, he was actually a full participant, so he's actually not on the Packers injury designation ahead of their game. But there was a point during this week that during that limited participation, he did say he was still feeling the effects of that elbow injury and how that's going to affect his throwing and everything like that, and how he feels on the day of the game is obviously going to be huge. But he has no injury designation, so he is going to be out there, but that is something to watch, right, and see how often the Packers go to try and throw, and how quickly also he gets rid of the ball. That's also something that kind of goes unnoticed, right? If they change how long they hold on to the ball and things like that. Jordan Love is one of them that usually I feel like does hold on to it a little bit longer, so it'll be interesting to see how quickly he kind of tries to get rid of it, or maybe if it affects him in a negative way, in case he might get a little bit of happy feet and you can see some of the anxiousness there without trying to get hit. All of that are, factors that we're going to see really play out on Sunday. But heading back into the preview more so of this game, Green Bay finds themselves in a similar spot to last year, right? As the 7th seed and as an extremely young team. Not the youngest like they were last year, but this year they're actually the second youngest team in the playoffs. And, they don't have that element of surprise anymore, right? And I brought this up, and I wanted to bring this up because last year, albeit the Cowboys, and everybody knows how unlucky, to say it positively, the Cowboys are in the playoffs, right? I think last year nobody really thought too much of this so-called Aaron Rodgers replacement, right? Nobody really thought that much of Jaden Reed. Like, who is that? Nobody knew who that was. Romeo Doubs, is he really a number one receiver? Christian Watson, how much can he do outside of the deep ball? Nobody really even heard of Dontavius Wicks before the last couple weeks of the season, and they used that to their advantage, and now we know how good all of those players are, obviously, and I think Philly and now everybody in the playoffs kind of aren't taking them for granted as much as they did last year, and especially Philadelphia with this defense. And the Eagles are definitely not the Cowboys when it comes to the playoffs. They're definitely going to be ready for the kind of threat that the Packers do possess when they are hitting on all cylinders. So that is something that really the Packers don't have kind of hidden in their back pocket. And going back to their first meeting to kind of pick away from things we saw in that game, the Eagles ended up winning 34-29, and in large part, that was due to Saquon Barkley. Obviously, he had 3 rushing touchdowns, or he had 2 rushing touchdowns and another receiving, and 109 rushing yards on the day. And obviously, that's something that the Packers can't allow to happen again. And one thing that is going to change in regards to defending Saquon Barkley this time around is their rookie linebacker, Edgerrin Cooper. He didn't really play their first time around, obviously, because he's a rookie and that was like the first game and everything like that. They're not just going to throw him out there. So he really didn't have an opportunity to go out there, show what he's all about. And then over the course of the season, I think now most of the Packers fans and most really of the NFL, if you follow the Packers a little bit, you really know who Edgerrin Cooper is. He's an every down linebacker now for them. He's super athletic. He's not your typical, I think, linebacker build. To me, he looks kind of like more like a bigger safety, kind of like DeMarvion Overshown for the Cowboys. They're not really like stout and kind of built out, width-wise. They're pretty lengthy and they're pretty rangy with how they move, and they're extremely fast, but still they don't get bullied in a way, right, by blocks. They're still strong enough to kind of get off blocks and be efficient in the run game. Those two guys to me are very similar, and I think Edgerrin Cooper has brought a lot to this Packers defense already, being one of their main pieces on that side of the ball. And I'm not saying he's going to go out there and completely stop Saquon, but it's definitely a huge help to have someone that athletic and especially that mature and already the football IQ with him and how, he's an every down linebacker for them. It's going to help a lot when trying to match the athleticism and physicality of not only Saquon, but that offensive line too, especially. So having him back there is going to be huge for them. And in terms of injury news, I already mentioned the quarterbacks and everything like that. Christian Watson, if any of you guys were unaware, he's not going to play. He tore his ACL, so he's done for the season. And one thing to also keep an eye on is A.J. Brown. He missed practice yesterday with a knee injury or just some sort of rest that they were giving him for that knee injury. I don't see him on here on the injury designation for the Eagles, so I assumed he was going to play, but it was just something that I wasn't expecting to see. Yeah, I mean, he has no injury designation, so I expected him to be out there, but that was something that, just was unexpected. I didn't think he was really dealing with anything, so that really is the only thing. Everything else looks pretty good to go for both the Packers and the Philadelphia Eagles. So again, that's also very good to see. You don't want anybody, being down and having a disadvantage or anything like that. So heading now into the goals that I think each team should have when they are trying to secure a victory, what is absolutely pivotal, in my opinion, for them to get a win is for the Packers. I want to see them start fast. I want to see them start fast because not only is Philadelphia one of the worst teams at not only starting the games, but in the first quarter, I don't have the exact point differential, but they're very far in the negative when it comes to that, right? The first quarter is not really an area or a part of the game where they're at their best. They're more so get a feel for the game, get more used to it, and then they kind of rev it up as the game goes on. The first quarter has not been too kind to them, so for the Green Bay Packers, I think that has to be something that's indisputable, something that they have to do in this game, right? And especially because in the first game, if I go back to it really quick, I know there was a bunch of opportunities where the Packers went down into the red zone and they just didn't convert, right? That credit to the Eagles defense for stopping them in all those red zone possessions. But if you're the Eagles, if you're the Packers, if you get down there that often, they got down there, I have it up here now, they got into the red zone 4 times and they only converted a touchdown on one of them. And that's obviously huge when you realize how close the game ended up being. So if you just get another touchdown, or just really that, if you just get another touchdown, you probably end up winning this game. So starting fast, and with that, comes the idea of being efficient in the red zone and making sure you take advantage of all your opportunities to put 7 up on the board and not 3 points, right? That's going to be massive for them. And if they could do that and start off very fast, get out to like a 10-0 or a 14-0 lead, then you kind of start having Philadelphia not only play catcher, but kind of play into your hands at that point. So that is something I think the Packers should do. And for the Eagles, right, I'd like to see them get Jalen Hurts in rhythm as fast as possible. I know I've been a stickler for them running the ball early and often as well, but in this case, maybe I'd accept them going out there and throwing a bit more, just so I can see Jalen, out there taking live snaps and maybe knocking some of that rust off. I'm not saying he's going to look bad or anything like that or unprepared, but I'd like to just see it, right? If I was a fan, I'd like to see Jalen complete a pass or two and just get him back into that game mode, adrenaline running early. I'd like to see that from Jalen, especially with a head injury and things like that and not being able to play whatsoever. I think that would really help the Eagles as well. But that leads me into the matchups here before I end up picking a winner. I kind of mentioned it before, Edgerrin Cooper going up against Saquon Barkley, that running back to linebacker matchup. It also plays into the fact that the Packers have the third-ranked run defense in terms of yards allowed per carry. So they've been pretty successful in that area, and I'm sure stopping Saquon is going to be one of their major points. And I think Edgerrin Cooper, if by any reason we see Saquon sort of struggle or not really get too much from his carries, you're going to see Edgerrin Cooper in the backfield or involved in a lot of that throughout the game. So don't be surprised if you see that. Also, Xavier McKinney kind of going up against Jalen Hurts, right? We got quarterback on the offense against quarterback on the defensive side of the ball. And McKinney's like I said, the quarterback back there for the Packers, and their defense finished third in takeaways in large part because of him and how many takeaways he got and the impact that he just has on opposing offenses, right? You don't want to throw it too close to him. The Eagles would know because Jalen Hurts threw an interception to him in their first game, so they know the threat of McKinney and kind of identifying him, making sure Jalen Hurts knows where he's at all times, and I'm sure the Packers are going to have some sort of spy on Jalen, whether it be McKinney or whether it be the other safety or maybe Edgerrin Cooper. That's going to be something that, McKinney has to, figure out on the defensive side of the ball as well. So that sort of chess match is going to be great to see. And lastly here, in a similar sort of area, I want to see A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith going up against a Packers secondary without Jair Alexander. I know they haven't had Jair for a while, but you would love to have him when you're going up against a wide receiver like A.J. Brown or Devontae Smith. And especially with Jalen Hurts coming back, maybe being a little bit rusty would definitely help to have a guy like that out there. But they're going to have to make do without him. And if the Eagles can take advantage of that, not only will that help them, obviously, but if they're having success in that area, you probably expect Jalen Hurts to be looking pretty good as well. So those are all the matchups, and with them in mind, the winner of this game, I believe, is going to be the Philadelphia Eagles. The game's very close. I mean, the game's pretty evenly matched on ESPN where I'm looking at it. I mean, the Eagles are only a 3.5 point favorite, and that's not really too big of a margin. I wouldn't be surprised if the Packers won this game. But I think the Eagles are going to win just because Jordan Love's elbow injury. I think that could be something that if he follows through, if he gets hit the wrong way, then you see him grab that elbow, and now, everything's kind of out the window, right? And that's not something that you can necessarily control. So that worries me, and I just don't know if Green Bay can keep up and kind of keep Philadelphia down enough offensively and defensively as well for them to kind of hold on and win this game, right? I don't know if they're going to be so efficient in the red zone, right? The Eagles have a great defense, and, the Packers, they've been pretty spotty in the passing game, so that is something that worries me in that regard. So I just don't know about the Packers. I have more questions about them than I do the Eagles, right? If the passing game's not working, then I have just as much confidence in Saquon in the running game and vice versa. And they have one of the best defenses playing in the playoffs. So there's a lot more things telling me Philadelphia than Green Bay. So I'm going to go with Philly at the link, getting the job done, probably covering the spread, I would imagine, and moving on to the next round. So we do got one more game to talk about, though, on Sunday. On Sunday Night Football, we got another rematch of a Week 1 game. This one between the Buccaneers and the Washington Commanders. Two great NFC quarterbacks going head-to-head. Experts are predicting a shootout. I would love to see it, but there's a lot more about this game that we have to know about, and I'll bring that to you when we return in just a few seconds.
Looking for your daily fix of sports talk without having to pay for it? GSMC Sports Network is available on YouTube. Just search GSMC Sports Network. Get your fix of daily sports talk shows on YouTube, absolutely free. NFL, college football, NBA, MLB, MMA, UFC, fantasy football, and so much more. GSMC Sports Network has shows running all day long, with new sports shows starting every 2 hours. Just like on your favorite cable sports channel, except GSMC Sports Network is absolutely free. Just search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube to catch one of your new favorite shows, like the GSMC College Football Podcast, Chip Shot Football Podcast, Hoops and Heels Women's Sports Podcast, GSMC Basketball Podcast, and so many more. Check it out for yourself. GSMC Sports Network, now available on YouTube absolutely free. Search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube right now.
We're back here on the Chip Shot Football Podcast to discuss our last wildcard game of today's show. Another rematch from Week 1. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers will host the Washington Commanders again this season, as they did back in Week 1, when the Buccaneers came out on top 37-20 in Jayden Daniels' first NFL experience. That was the first ever game Jayden Daniels played in the NFL, and obviously, the score says what the score says, right? A 17-point defeat doesn't necessarily look great, but, this time around, we could see potentially even more points from this game when we have two of the top 5 NFL offenses going head-to-head. And Tampa Bay arrives in this spot to host a playoff game again after winning 6 of their last 7 games to win the NFC South again, and the Commanders enter also on a 5-game winning streak, not to win the division, but to secure themselves a spot in the playoffs. And obviously that's huge, just because there was a point in time where it got a little bit doubtful with the Commanders, right? They kind of hit a skid there, and it got close between them, maybe the Seahawks, and a couple other teams, flirting around the wild card spots. But they earned themselves this spot by going on that winning streak, like I mentioned, and now it's anybody's game, but I think there's definitely certain advantages that we could find in a lot of these matchups. So with that in mind, we've seen Tampa Bay also in this spot, last year when they also won the division. They were playing also another NFC East rival, and they came out on top in that matchup. But a big difference from last year going into this year as well, according to Baker Mayfield, and I agree with him, is the running game that he highlighted in one of his recent, media gatherings, right? He highlighted the running game and said that it was a big reason why, not only they have the success that they're having now, but it's a big difference now going into this year's playoffs. And, you look at the running game for the Buccaneers and you think of Bucky Irving, obviously their rookie running back, and how just sensational he's been for them, quite honestly. Rachaad White, who they had last year, and he might not be getting the volume as he did last year, but he's still having an impact in the running game, but also coming out of the backfield as well and being a good pass-catching option. Sean Tucker, another young running back for them, and even Baker Mayfield, like we saw last week, he's able to get out of the pocket and run for first downs and gain positive yards when he needs to, and he's not afraid also of taking a hit or two when he needs to as well. So the combination of all 4 of those guys really has made a significant difference, because they were one of the worst rushing teams last year. I think they were maybe 30th or something like that, or 29th, and now this year they're 3rd in the NFL in yards per carry. So that's a huge jump, obviously, and it's even more significant in this game when they're playing a Washington Commanders defense that enters as the worst ranked run defense of any playoff team currently, right? The Commanders rank 30th against the run out of all the playoff teams. That's obviously the worst one. And the Buccaneers, on the other side of things, if we want to compare them, they're the 4th ranked run defense. So that's a big, difference in terms of the defense and how well they hold up against the run, obviously. And going up against all 4 of those guys, like I mentioned, is not going to be an easy task for the Commanders. It could go sideways very quickly if they don't stop that running game. But before we continue on, kind of projecting and looking at the matchup and these teams more closely, we got to talk about some of the injuries that could affect this game and, some positive news as well as some concerning things, I would say, for each team. One of them being for Tampa Bay, their cornerback Jamal Dean has been a limited participant this week in their practices. He was dealing with a knee injury, and he could have a chance to play for the first time since December 29th. It's been a good amount of weeks since they've had Jamal Dean, which I believe is their best cornerback out there on the field, and he could be a massive help, obviously, going up against Terry McLaurin. And maybe not the biggest names at wide receivers, but it's definitely going to help out, obviously, knowing that you don't have to worry so much about one side of the field. Jamal Dean, I'm looking at it now at his updated injury status. He was a full participant today at practice, and he is listed as questionable for the game this upcoming Sunday, but after logging a full participation in practice, it makes me feel even more confident that they're going to have their top cornerback out there for their first playoff game. So that's going to be huge for them. And speaking about number 1 cornerbacks, on the other side of things, the Commanders have Marshawn Lattimore, and he's missed the last couple games as well with a hamstring injury that kind of flared up again. But he's been a full participant all week, and he is definitely going to be out there for them, which is huge because their pass defense isn't necessarily as great as their run defense. So having a guy like Marshawn Lattimore out there, I would say even more than Jamal Dean, is that number 1 shutdown corner. So that's going to be huge for them. Also, on the side of the Washington Commanders, you look at their center, or their supposed starting center, Tyler Biadasz, who has been dealing with a ankle injury up until this point. So that is something to kind of look out and see what the status is on him. If I can find it now, any updated version of him. I mean, he has no injury designation as of right now. He was in and out of the game last week, I want to say, so he's been a limited participant all week at practice, and now he doesn't have an injury designation. So it looks like he's going to be out there. Obviously, a massive contribution for the offensive line, but also a rookie quarterback that would love to have his starting center out there. So that's more positive news for the Commanders. And Tristan Wirfs and also Antoine Winfield, 2 of the most important players for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, were having an eye out on them this week for, the injuries and stuff like that. Tristan Wirfs, obviously a huge piece for them on the left tackle side of things. He was a limited participant all week dealing with a quad injury, but he has no injury designation, so he should be good to go. And on the other side, like I mentioned, Antoine Winfield, he is listed as questionable going into this game, but he was a full participant on Wednesday and Thursday, and he hasn't played since December 8th, actually. So he recorded another full practice today, but he's still listed as questionable. But after a whole week of fully practicing, I expect him to make his return to that Tampa Bay Buccaneers secondary. So a lot of returns, a lot of positives for this injury report for the Sunday Night Football game, which is great to see. So now we could bring this last preview here to the things I want to see. 2 goals that I'd like to see in this game, 1 from each team, in order for them to get the victory. Starting off with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, for them, I would like to see them try and keep Jalen Daniels from running as much as he's been accustomed to over the last couple weeks, right? There's no surprise that the Commanders have such an efficient running game, and also when you look at their running numbers, their quarterback is actually their leading rusher all season. And it's obviously unusual, kind of more of a bother, right? Obviously kind of accounting for the quarterback and trying to keep him from taking off for like 20, 25 yards. So if the Buccaneers are able to keep Jayden Daniels in the pocket and really limit this Washington Commanders defense to only Brian Robinson and not too much after that, it's going to help them a lot more. And already with them having an okay run defense, I mean, their run defense actually is fourth, I forgot to mention. So they have the fourth ranked run defense. So you can kind of, feel good about your chances going up against the defensive line and their running back. But adding a quarterback in there obviously makes it a lot more difficult. So if they could go in there with a set goal of trying to keep Jayden Daniels in the pocket, I mean, he's extremely accurate, but at that point, you're forcing kind of other guys to not only get open, but get open quickly and making sure they win their battles, right? Guys like Zacchaeus and Jamison Crowder and Zach Ertz, right? If Jayden Daniels just can't run and get first downs, they need to get open a lot more at an efficient level to help him out. So I think that's going to be huge for the Buccaneers if they're going to be able to limit Jayden Daniels and take away his legs, basically. And then for the Washington Commanders on the other side, try and take as much as what the defense gives you. And what I mean by that is the Buccaneers usually don't play a lot of like in-your-face man coverage, kind of bump and kind of shadow you, all game long. They usually give you a good amount of space and just try not to get beat deep and things like that. So for them, even if it does seem a bit monotonous and just kind of simple, and I don't like to say the word boring, but just kind of like taking the checkdowns and basically taking what the defense gives you, I think doing that, at least at the start, would benefit the Commanders, just so you get Terry McLaurin involved a lot quicker, you get the passing game involved a lot quicker, and maybe you get guys going like Zacchaeus, and maybe like a Luke McCaffrey or something like that, or Jamison Crowder, and even Zach Ertz, right? You get those guys in the game a lot earlier, and that could benefit you, right? If you're doing that a lot, then you force the Buccaneers to kind of maneuver off of that. Maybe they come up a little bit closer, and they're not the best in the passing game, as opposed to their run defense, which is pretty well ranked. Their passing defense isn't that good, so they just don't have the guys for that, really. So if they're able to do that, I think that would be a huge point for them to try and win this game. And in that same breath, we're moving on to the matchups now, and like I mentioned before, one of them is, like I just mentioned actually, the Washington offense going up against the Buccaneers' 29th ranked passing defense, right? They're ranked like that for a reason. They try not to give up the big plays, try not to lose the down or the play in just one single, throw over the top. They'll try to make you earn it and really earn your way down the field, right? Not getting beat deep, conservative, keeping everything in front of you, and I think that could benefit a quick passing game that Cliff Kingsbury brings, especially when you got a quarterback as accurate as Jayden Daniels. So that's one of the matchups I want to see, and see how maybe the Bucs try to switch things up, how early they do that, and how successful they are at doing that as well. But the other matchups are also mentioned before: the Buccaneers runners, their rushers, Sean Tucker, Bucky Irving, Rashad White, all those guys against Washington's run defense. It's as simple as that, right? We have a team that really wants to run the ball and a running defense that's not very good. Whatever comes out on top is going to be a huge determinant in this game. And of course, the main event. The main event, to me, the main event matchup is obviously Mike Evans and Marshawn Lattimore. I don't think I have to say much. If you guys have ever seen Mike Evans play against the Saints, and especially when Marshawn Lattimore was there, you can find it anywhere, how those matchups usually ended. You got guys shoving each other, getting into fights, a lot of contact, at the point of attack before, the ball comes their way. It gets very physical, and I wouldn't be surprised if it led to that at some point in the game on Sunday Night Football. They know each other very well. I don't know if they like each other or if it's just competition or anything like that. It doesn't look like it. So that's going to be awesome to watch, right? They're competitors. They're it's do or die. So it's Mike Evans against Marshawn Lattimore. That's going to be an awesome matchup. And in terms of who's winning this game, I had a really tough time picking it because you get Antoine Winfield back. You have Tristan Wirfs. It looks like you're gonna have Jamal Dean back. But I couldn't, for whatever reason, write the Buccaneers down as my winner. I just couldn't do it. I wanted to write them down. My head is telling me to pick the Buccaneers, but I think Jaden Daniels could be one of those guys. Like one of those Patricks and Lamars, right, where you win because of them. You win because Jaden Daniels is just simply on your team and he's doing Jaden Daniels sort of things. Is it too early to say he's that kind of quarterback? Yes, but I'm also, not directly saying he's Patrick Mahomes. I think there's some signs that he can get there, and I think getting a win on the road like this is not out of the realm of possibility. And I started getting a little bit more confidence in him, especially when he beat the Eagles at home in Washington. I know Jalen Hurts didn't play, but he still had to face that defense. And the way he played, accounting for 5 touchdowns, I think this could be one of those, early career playoff defining kind of legacy moments for Jaden Daniels. I think he's that kind of quarterback. So I'm going to go with the Commanders to win this game. I think they're just going to win because of Jaden Daniels, simply as that. He's going to will their way to a victory, and they're going to get a road victory, and then they're going to play on the road again against whoever ends up winning in all the other matchups. So that's really my only one that, for some reason, I'm liking the Commanders. I think they have the guys to do it, especially if they get 1 or 2 lucky breaks. Just having Jaden Daniels, I think, is going to be enough for them. So those are all the predictions from yesterday and today. We'll see how it all turns out on Monday. But for right now, we're going to move on to a similar topic we talked about yesterday, looking at all the important players for each playoff team, this time in the NFC. So we're going to shift our focus to that when the show returns in just a few seconds.
For the best and latest podcasts available anywhere, go to the podcast app on your cell phone and type in GSMC to access free content-rich podcasts on health and wellness, book reviews, sports, entertainment, relationships, social media, movies, technology, finance, and even weird news. Subscribe and download the GSMC Podcast Network's family of shows, available everywhere podcasts are found.
Thank you guys for joining me back here on the show. We're going to go into our next topic that we have on here, and it's kind of like a continuation to this segment we talked about yesterday, looking at all the significant players to each playoff team. I did the same thing yesterday in the AFC, and now we're going to look at the NFC side of things, right? Just for time's sake, I split it up this way. So looking at all the playoff teams in the NFC, starting off with the Los Angeles Rams. I didn't preview them because their game is on Monday. So we're going to talk more about the whole team and that game when Monday rolls around. But for right now, I can bring up who I think their most important player is going to be, not only for the wild card round, but also the entirety of the playoffs. And that's obviously Kyren Williams, as you guys see. To me, he's the pacemaker. He's the pacekeeper for them. He keeps everything steady and at a good balance for this offense, right? He's sort of like the compass for them, right? If everything's going well and he's playing well, it usually leads you north, right? To keep the analogy going, right? It leads you into the right direction in trying to win this game, right? You look at the games like the New York Jets and also the San Francisco 49ers, very low-scoring games, right? 2 defenses playing very well. You're not really getting too much from the passing game outside of Puka Nacua, and you can't really convert. But you have a guy like Kyren Williams that is able to keep the ball with you for the majority of the game, and that way you're really limiting the opposing team, right? They might not know when they're touching the ball again, right? And it doesn't really matter who they have on that side. If you have the ball for the majority of it, they can't score on you, right? And then once they do get the ball, they might feel rushed or they might feel like they're not in a groove or things like that. So that's what I mean when he kind of sets the pace for everything. And if he's rolling, right, then the Rams have a good control and a good feel for this game if Kyren Williams is doing his thing. So also, I think you could go to him a little bit more frequently and at a more of a successful rate than Puka or Cooper, because I just think that's naturally what happens with running backs and wide receivers, right? I think it's more intricate and a little bit more complicated to get the ball to the wide receivers more often than not when opposing defenses know that they're trying to get you the ball. As a running back, if their offensive line's playing great and everything's working smoothly, you can only do so much, right? They're going to push you back and they're going to run the ball if they're playing at that level. So I think Kyren Williams is going to be huge for the Rams in that respect going forward. Then the other guy in that same matchup that I think is going to be important for the Minnesota Vikings is Jordan Addison. And it might be a little surprising because if I was going to pick a wide receiver, right, you probably would have thought I was going to pick Justin Jefferson. But I think the way I thought of it in my head, it has to do obviously with Jordan Addison, but also how it relates to Sam Darnold. And I didn't want to pick quarterbacks, but this has to do as much as with Jordan Addison as much as it does with Sam Darnold. And what I mean by that is when Sam Darnold, you see him play at his best, when he's getting everybody involved, when Justin Jefferson's getting his touches, when Jordan Addison has like 5 receptions for like 70 yards or something like that. TJ Hawkinson has another 4 receptions. They're running the ball at an efficient rate. That's when you can tell Sam's feeling good. He's feeling comfortable. He's making all the throws that he needs to, obviously, right? Everybody's connected. He's connecting with everybody in their offense, right? Everybody is contributing, basically. But Justin Jefferson always gets the attention, right? So when they might be having a good game or when they might not be having a good game, you might not be able to tell just by looking at Justin, because that's going to be one of the main things that opposing teams are going to try and take away. So if like say the Rams focus on Justin all game long, he might have like 3 receptions for like 30 yards, but they might be winning the game because the Rams are focusing on him so much that everybody else is eating. But why I picked Jordan Addison as the guy to kind of look towards to see how well the Vikings are performing is when he's having a bad game and he's, getting shut down and they're really not getting anything from him, it's usually when the entire offense isn't really flowing as it should, because Justin Jefferson, like I said, is going to get the attention regardless, so his stats might be deceiving. When Jordan Addison, who usually gets good one-on-one matchups or maybe doesn't get as much attention as Justin Jefferson, that's when you can tell, all right, if Justin Jefferson's not getting the ball, hopefully these other guys are working. But if they're all getting shut down, then this offense is kind of stumbling over each other. They're not really getting first downs and they're punting a lot. So we saw that against the Lions. They did a good job of taking everybody out of the game, getting in Sam's face. And, if you can't have Jordan Addison contributing in this game, then it really limits it for Sam, and he looks flustered, he looks rushed, and he might be holding on to the ball too long. That's why I picked Jordan Addison, right? You can tell more when this offense is humming, when he's involved, when he's getting the attention, and then the opposing defense doesn't really know what to do right at that point. But if he's not having a good game, then it usually is a good indicator that everybody else is struggling. So that's going to be a big point of it, if how quickly and often Jordan Addison can contribute and also Sam Darnold get them the ball as well. And then moving through these other games, we alluded to it a little bit in the Bucks and the Commanders preview. Bucky Irving, to me, is the guy to focus on. Baker Mayfield said it himself that the running game and the addition, therefore, of Bucky Irving has been a huge difference for them this year, especially when you don't have Chris Godwin, and you do get contributions from Jalen McMillan and those sort of guys, right, in the passing game. But I think the running game has really added more variety, more of a freshness, because it's not only Bucky Irving, I highlighted him, but it's Sean Tucker, Rashad White, those guys as well. The variety on top of the ability that they have is a great combination to have on any team. And the numbers also say it. I mean, Tampa Bay last year was last in rushing yards, and now this year they're third in the NFL in yards per carry, where last year they were last in 3.4 yards per carry. Now they've outrushed their last 8 opponents, and they have a 6-2 record when they've outrushed their last 8 opponents. So obviously, it's a point of emphasis to get the running game going. It adds a lot more to this offense, and it makes them harder to stop. So Bucky Irving is going to be a big dictator of how well they're able to do that and how successful they could be this upcoming Sunday in the playoffs. So he's one of them. And then on the opposite side, if Bucky Irving's going to get involved, it has to be Brian Robinson as well. You know, they got to match Tampa Bay at least, right? You can't just have Sean Tucker, Rashad White, and Bucky Irving dominating the run game and Brian Robinson getting stuffed every other play. They got to at least match it. And you can add to it with Jaden Daniels as well. He can be included in here with Brian Robinson as well. And, I mean, Terry McLaurin also, to add to this point, you know he'll most likely than not get his production, his contribution, but just him alone is not going to be enough. Obviously, him getting the attention from the opposing defense, you're going to have to rely on Zacchaeus and those other guys, but it can't just be that. It has to be Brian Robinson as well, and that way, you know, you kind of throw the opposing defense off as well. And I think every one of Washington's last 4 games have been victories, but by only 6 points or less. In those games, Brian Robinson has not eclipsed 65 yards rushing, and they're really at their best, you can tell, when he's getting success on the ground. When he's contributing to it, then you could add read options, RPOs, then you get more guys down in the box, meaning better matchups for guys like Zacchaeus and Zach Ertz and guys like that. Paired up with Jaden Daniels' accuracy, it's a must-have for the Commanders to get Brian Robinson involved. So I picked him as well. And in the last game I have on here, Saquon is obviously the guy I went with. There's not much to say other than kind of like we mentioned yesterday with Derrick Henry. When you got a guy like Saquon, when you add a guy like Derrick, you have to make sure they affect the game in any way possible, right? If they're not producing, at least the defense is focusing on them, helping other guys get involved. And if other guys are doing well, then Saquon Barkley, you know, kind of hurts you as well on the other end of things. So it's an obvious thing. You don't want to have that regret of bringing Saquon Barkley in and then looking back on the game and say, oh, we should have ran the ball more. We should have ran the ball earlier with Saquon. Like, that's obvious. That has to happen. So Saquon has got to always be someone that affects the game. And to me, he's their most important player. Simple as that. And he's the only difference from this team, really. If you look at last year, they were just as talented. But when you add a guy like Saquon, it's like a cheat code, basically. So he's got to affect the game and impact them and really make the difference for them in this year's playoffs. And then, lastly, we got Josh Jacobs on the other side of things. I didn't want this to kind of be like a running back ranking like it looks, because I picked all running backs, but I did say that was the theme of this year's playoffs, right? Having a good running game, and all the good running backs just seem to be in the NFC, apparently. All of them seem to be, other than Minnesota. But yeah, I mean, Josh Jacobs has to do the same thing that Saquon's going to try to do, right? It's clear when he's on his game, the passing game obviously looks a lot more fluid and efficient, right? You see Jordan Love dropping back and having a clearer picture than when Josh Jacobs isn't really contributing at all. And on top of that, you know, Jordan Love's dealing with an elbow injury. There's no Christian Watson on top of that as well. So maybe Josh Jacobs has to do even more now because they're down in the passing game. So if they're able to get the most out of him and having him try and match Saquon and hopefully exceed the production that Saquon is giving for the Philadelphia Eagles, it's going to be a lot easier for the Packers to get the job done. They're going to keep Philadelphia's offense off the field if they're able to do that with Josh Jacobs, right? And if you look at the games where he's taken over, you look at the 49ers game, the Seahawks game, the Saints game, all those games the Packers have done very well in. And it's no surprise that Josh Jacobs, even the Lions game where they played him down to the last sort of play there in Detroit, Josh has been a huge part of all of those games. So that's as far as possible in these playoffs. So now that we've gone through all of that, we'll see how many of those guys come through for their teams this upcoming weekend. But we do have one more segment to get to before we get out of here. I wanted to touch on the Falcons situation with Kirk Cousins and address what their general manager said about Kirk and potentially keeping him on as the backup quarterback rather than looking for a trade for him like maybe a bunch of us thought. So that'll be the last segment, and we'll get to it after this quick break. Thank you guys for joining me here on the last segment of today's show, just to go over some other news that I saw elsewhere in the NFL regarding the Atlanta Falcons and their quarterback situation, because the Falcons obviously barely missed the playoffs this season after seeing their 6-3 NFC South leading record kind of dwindle away as the season went on. And the Buccaneers obviously won that division, and now the Falcons find themselves with another losing season and missing the playoffs for a 7th consecutive year as well. And I think we started to see things change really on an offensive perspective when they lost to the Saints after they had just been too much of it. I just felt like, it was a bad Sunday for the Falcons. It's not really going to matter. Just the way they had been playing leading up until that game, I thought, man, this looks bad, but their offense is going to be all right. The way that it was playing leading up until that game. But obviously I didn't know that loss to the Saints was going to start a 4-game losing streak for the Falcons that was mainly centered around Kirk Cousins and their offense, basically. Because I know their defense wasn't very good, and that really was evident throughout the entire season. But you could cover it up a little bit when the way their offense was playing. You could cover it up, like I said, because of the fact that if you're able to put up enough points, you could just simply outscore teams. And the defense might have to make maybe one stop or two here or there, but the way the offense was playing, it masked it a little bit. And then when they went on this 4-game losing streak, you really got to see how deficient this defense was, and the offense just out of nowhere, just falling off a cliff, basically. They just weren't the same. Again, centered around Kirk Cousins, it felt like. And that was week 10 to week 14. And we saw the worst version of Kirk Cousins from that point on, which led to a lot of pressure being placed on the Falcons to kind of do something to save their season. The noise around Michael Penix became louder and louder until you got to, what was it, week 15 or something like that, when they still beat the Raiders, but it was only 15-9, and the Falcons decided to go to Michael Penix. And from that point on, they didn't look back, obviously, and through his 3 games that he played, he won the first one against the Giants, then he lost in the next 2, but you could clearly tell that the offense was looking a lot different. It was looking a lot better, more explosive, and it met everybody's expectations to what they thought this offense was going to look like, with Drake London, Darnell Mooney Kyle Pitts was used a lot more. Bijan Robinson was doing his thing. Tyler Algier as well. It looked and it met the ceiling of what this Falcons team could really be, more so than it did with Kirk Cousins off of that Week 10 loss, and then going forward after that, the offense kind of lost its way, and they found it again through Michael Penix. They scored at least 24 points in each of the games that they started with him. So now it looks pretty clear that this is Michael Penix's job now, right? And many assumed after, we saw that, decision being made and that realization also from the Atlanta Falcons that they looked to have their future starting quarterback in Michael Penix, that they were going to try and trade Kirk Cousins because of a result of that, right? But their general manager, Terry Fontenot, put the brakes on that all yesterday when he met with the media, and he said the following. He said, we are very comfortable moving forward with Kirk as our backup. Kirk is a great man, and he's been a great support for Mike. We are very comfortable moving forward with him as the backup. And although he says that, there has been some contradicting reports off of the bat of that, and even before that, right? Because before that, when, like I said, when Michael Penix made that jump to be the starter, or really when the Falcons decided that it was time to move off of Kirk Cousins, one of the reports that came out maybe like a week or a week and a half later came from ESPN that reported that executives around the NFL expected the Falcons to cut Kirk Cousins before March 17th because they wanted to avoid that $10 million roster bonus, so it made sense for them that Kirk Cousins clearly was past the level that kept him as the starting quarterback. So a lot of executives, like the report said, figured that the Falcons were going to cut him before they owed him even more money, right? Then this week, you get another report from the NFL Network that also said, this one more in line with what their general manager, Terry Fontenot, was saying. The report claimed that the Falcons will listen to trade offers because they prefer not to outright cut Kirk Cousins, and it also said, this report, that they're also open to keeping Kirk Cousins on the roster. So this one aligning a lot more than that ESPN report, but it does, of emphasis, a huge swaying point, right? Because the original plan was to have Kirk there, probably play at least 2 years, because that's when the guaranteed money ran out, right? The guaranteed money is for the first 2 years, and then it's not guaranteed anymore. But obviously that point of making the switch over to Michael Penix came a lot earlier, and now you owe him guaranteed money for the next year. And some of these scenarios that follow this situation obviously have to do with the financial side. And there's a couple options that the Falcons can go through if they decide on one of them. One of them would be to cut him before June 1st, kind of like the March 17th sort of deadline. And if they cut him before June 1st, they are going to have $65 million in dead cap money this upcoming year. So that's not very attractive for the Falcons, obviously. But that's one option they could do if they really just want to move on from him. They could trade him before June 1st, but then that would mean $37.5 million in cap space, and depending on what you're going to get for him, that might not be worth it if you're not going to get back the necessary compensation that you believe is appropriate for Kirk Cousins. So that's another option they could do. Another thing they could do is release him after June 1st, but that would result in just kind of spreading out the money over 2 years rather than just paying it all up front. They would have $12.5 million in cap space. Oh, no, excuse me, I'm looking at the wrong thing. They would have $40 million in dead cap this upcoming year, and then $25 million in dead cap in 2026 if they cut him after June 1st. If they trade him after June 1st, they would still owe $12.5 million in dead cap and $25 million in 2026. So they'd have, it would just be spread out, but they would have $27.5 million in cap savings in 2025 if they trade him after June 1st. But it could get a little bit tricky then because you're talking about after the draft, and teams kind of have an idea of what their team is sort of going to look like. So to kind of find value after June 1st, after some teams have drafted a quarterback, maybe you find some more after some other teams miss out on a quarterback, but around March or in April or something like that, right? That could be something they could consider, but also they could just keep him, like their general manager said. So in terms of that, I mean, it doesn't sound like an awful idea. I think it could be their only option when I come to think of it, just because you think about the contract, obviously, and the money is a big thing. The amount of money you could save by trading him or cutting him and everything like that. All the numbers I just threw out at you guys are obviously going to be impactful, but I think it also has to do with the level of play he's shown. Who's going to want to trade for that, right? Who's going to want to bring him in? Maybe as a starting quarterback, is anybody going to be able to do that and think that way, right? Especially paying that amount of money is going to be something that teams are really going to have to consider. So should they keep him? I think if without everything else and without any of the other money and things like that, that's tough. I was going to say I wouldn't, but if we're not going to bring in money, then he's a quality backup, I guess. But I guess you can't take away the money. So that's going to stay. So talking about his contract and things like that and really looking at the landscape of it all, I think keeping him should be something that probably they are going to really wrestle with, and they're probably going to end up doing, if I were to guess. Just because it's so fresh off of this season, right? Playing as bad as he did, and then the next season somebody else trades a decent amount for him and has him on their roster, I think that's a bit too quick. So should they keep him? I think they probably will do that just because of the circumstances that they find themselves in with him. But, you look at other teams and you look at maybe a place like Cleveland, that whole situation with Deshaun is in a place where I didn't think it could get to. I didn't think it could get any worse, but it apparently did today when he re-ruptured his Achilles, so now he could miss the entirety of next year. I'm going to talk about that more next week, but yeah, Cleveland could be somewhere, but they're already giving a lot of money to him. Are they going to fit that contract in with Kirk now? Doesn't seem smart. You look at a place like San Francisco, they say they want to give an extension to Brock Purdy, but maybe they have an insurance come in with Kirk if they're not able to do that. That could be another option. The Raiders need a quarterback. They've needed one for a while. Are they going to be able to trade up for one or maybe draft one in the draft? That's something else that could affect that decision. That's a team to watch out for. Both of the New York teams, I don't think Aaron Rodgers is coming back. And the Jets, what is going to be their plan at quarterback, right? They're going to need one. And like I said, they're not going to bring Aaron Rodgers back, so you're going to try and find somebody to kind of give you that same production. It's not so easy just picking someone off the street. So that could be a viable option for them. And the other New York team, right, the Giants, they're in a position to draft one, but maybe you don't. You draft Travis Hunter and you try and build around Kirk or something like that if they feel that's appropriate. I don't know. I wouldn't want to do that if my team was in that position, and I like the Steelers, and they very well could be in the running for a situation like that, right, depending on what happens with Russ. But I personally wouldn't want to do that, but you never know with the circumstances and how teams operate this offseason, right? A lot of things could happen to a roster that maybe it looks enticing, that bringing on Kirk Cousins could be a good option for them. But at this point in time, it does feel like he is going to stay on the Falcons just based on his play, and the money obviously is a big swaying point. But let me know what you guys think about that. Where do you guys think Kirk Cousins will end up in 2025? And while you guys do that, that brings us to the end of this show, and I want to thank you guys for joining me on today's episode. Please remember to like, follow, and subscribe to the Chip Shot Football Podcast, as well as following the network on all forms of social media. If you want to see more of this show specifically, you can go to the Sports Network channel and the Podcast Network channel on YouTube for more content around the Chip Shot Football Podcast, more coverage around the NFL, more breakthroughs, previews, breaking news, discussions around the league, everything with me, Manny Maradiega, as your host. Hoping you guys have a great weekend. Hope you guys enjoy the wild card rounds. Try and watch as many as possible, and we'll be back on here on Monday to break all of them down, as well as talking about the wild card game on Monday as well. So I'll see you guys back here on Monday.
Let's go. I wake up to a little bit of drool on my pillow, feel like it's gonna be a bad day. Yeah, I'm tired of shit, and the coffee ain't hit yet, damn, ain't that great.